A couple things, even though it was a very generous introduction, a couple things as a matter of personal privilege, since I have the mic, that were left out of my introduction that I'm fairly proud of. For starters, when the Los Angeles Times picked me up as a columnist, Barbara Streisand publicly canceled her subscription to the LA Times. In show business, you would just leave the stage after that because you're supposed to leave on a high note. And in my business, it just doesn't get any better than that. Also, just in the last year alone, Keith Olbermann has dubbed me the worst person in the world at least 3 times. I think one of the reasons he doesn't understand why I'm such a pain in his butt is that it's the fastest route to his brain. Matthew, in his remarks earlier, was saying how can I beat Mark Stein on this Earth Day stuff, and I can't beat Mark Stein at anything. First of all, I'm convinced he's a James Bond villain, but in terms of the Earth Day stuff, saying that a third of the children think that the Earth is going to come to an end. This is actually something that's in my book a little bit, is the sort of relentless anti-human bias in children's programming and in children's education today, where humans, especially since the dawn of the Judeo-Christian tradition, are the problem, and they're the problem for Earth and all the rest. My favorite example of this comes from about 15 years ago, where there was a cartoon called Captain Planet that I used to watch from time to time, put out by Ted Turner, and it was pure UN propaganda. All the wonderful children of the world get together and they form this superhero who always does good things to save the planet and all the rest. Anyway, there was one episode where all the evil villains, and of course all the evil villains are businessmen who think that they will maximize their profit margins if they could just bury more radioactive waste underneath America's playgrounds. These evil businessmen are pitted against the Planeteers, these wonderful children who look like America, and on a game show like Family Feud. And the question for the contestants is, what would be the best thing you could possibly do for the planet? And the villains are throwing out things like kill more puppies or whatever. I mean, they don't get it. But the kids are throwing out things like, reduce, reuse, recycle. And the Bing survey says that's number 4 on the board. And other kids say, take only pictures, leave only footprints or whatever. Number 2 on the board. The number 1 answer, and I'm not making this up, was get rid of all of the human beings on the planet. And this was a TV show aimed at preschoolers. And we are now seeing this pay off, so to speak. One last point, since we were bringing up the news today. I don't know, this is the Bringing Coals to Newcastle award of the day. Since the morning papers, it has been announced that Arlen Specter is officially switching to the Democratic Party. And he's going to run as a Democrat in Pennsylvania. I am not making this up. For some of us, when we heard that he was switching parties, we were hoping this would mean he was now a Republican. But alas, it is not to be the case. So Arlen Specter is a Democrat, and to this day, bears continue to use our national forests as toilets. This is not shocking news. Anyway, I am truly delighted to be here. Heritage Foundation is a wonderful place. FEE is a well-storied and wonderful organization. Of course, I'm a partisan for National Review. And I think one of the things I always like to sort of emphasize about organizations like this when I do events like this is they always struck me as sort of like medieval monasteries in Ireland during the Dark Ages, keeping the light of Christian civilization alive until the barbarians were willing to once again receive it. And organizations like this, what they do is they train monks, essentially. And these monks then train out acolytes, and they go forth bringing the word of free markets and limited government to the barbarians. And alas, not enough barbarians want to hear it. But it's vital and important work, and I think they should be saluted for it. Anyway, the title of my talk, which I sort of gave to these guys on a whim, was Cheer Up, for the Worst Is Yet to Come. And I can't even remember what was going on so terribly in the news at the time that made me want to say it, but I was right. Which it brings to mind, there's a famous line by Friedrich Hayek in an essay of his where he says, It has invariably been the fate of conservatism to be dragged along a path not of its own choosing. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. And it came to mind, particularly in stark relief to me, when we had that debate about the TARP, the bailout money, in September at the tail end of the presidential election. And John Boehner, good and honorable man, but not a huge, deep thinker, he had a wonderful sort of rephrasing of Hayek's basic principle. He said of the TARP vote, it's a crap sandwich, but I'm going to eat it anyway. And if I'm allowed to quote myself, and I think I am, at the time I went back and looked what I wrote in my LA Times column about it, and I said, quote, "Well, Boehner's straight talk is welcome. The problem is that the meal ain't over. No matter what happens, the corporophagia, you can look it up, won't end with the bailout. The sandwich of which Boehner speaks is actually an enormous sub stretching far as the eye can see, and conservatives will be dragged along the path of a buffet line not of their choosing for a long time to come." And the good news, once again, I was right. Now, admittedly, this is not like really good news. I mean, this is sort of like telling Mrs. Lincoln that she's going to be fully refunded on the ticket to the theater. But as a pundit, I take my victories where I can. For those of you who don't know, a pundit is an Indian word. It comes from India, and in India it means a master of philosophy and literature and culture and music and arts and all of these sorts of things. And in the United States it basically means a hack journalist who's willing to make any prediction possible as long as he's not held accountable, and he's perfectly willing to change it if there's free shrimp in an open bar. I'm more that kind of pundit, alas. So anyway, so that was the good news. I was right. Now the bad news. Where to begin? Okay, we're here at a first principles summit. Right? We're here to talk about free markets and limited government. And given what's going on in Washington, that's sort of like attending a Civil War reenactment society, or a Star Trek convention. As Matthew mentioned, the Wall Street Journal this morning announced that the government that GM is asking the government to take over 50% of GM. And my guess is that the government is going to say, okay. What's left out, what Matt didn't mention, is that the UAW, according to this plan, will get 40%. So 90% of GM will allegedly be owned by the federal government or the United Auto Workers Union. Now, who among us doubts that they're just going to produce awesome cars? The problem is, they used to say what's good for GM is good for America, right? And what really concerns me is that the Obama administration thinks that's still true, right? And that they actually want a sort of similar relationship with most business enterprises, where the lion's share of the pie will be divided between government and unions, and about 10% goes towards these things called markets. And just yesterday, Barack Obama said that he wants to commit 3% of GDP, not 3% of the federal budget, right, which is the only thing that the President of the United States in our constitutional republic is supposed to be in charge of, is the federal budget. And he's not even really in charge of that, right? But that's the stuff he's supposed to be talking about. He wants 3% of GDP to be dedicated to science and research and development. Now, that's on top of everything else that he's already spent. And while I'm in favor of research and development and government funding basic research and the rest, what you can see coming down the pike from something like that is essentially a system by which they use these research funds to skew the marketplace, to get corporations to bend their business models towards what pleases bureaucrats rather than what pleases markets. And it is a recipe for corporatism and the blending of big government and big business, because you just can't fit that much money in the pipeline into legitimate research projects. Anyway, it's also good to keep in mind this 3%, right, is on top of what he's already committed in his first 100 days. In his first 100 days, on top of the government that we had when Bush left office, which, all praise to Bush as appropriate, was an already way too big government, Barack Obama in his first 100 days has committed $6.5 trillion more dollars in debt. Just in debt, not more spending, in debt. That's $65 billion a day for his first 100 days in office, which is, by my very rudimentary math skills, $270 million an hour, or $4.5 million a minute, or $750,000 a second since he's been president.